Hello and a warm welcome from me, astrologer Patrick Arundell. Today I'm going to explore the astrology of July 2023. I'm also going to share your in-depth zodiac forecast from Aries through to Pisces, which you can relate to in terms of your sun or your ascendant. First up, I'm going to give you some snippets of what this month is about, but stay with me please, because I then will explore in much greater detail all the key influences and timings that are going to impact upon us all. If you're a new viewer to my channel, thank you so much for joining me. I'd be honoured if you would subscribe. Please click or tap on the bell notification symbol. Every time I drop a video, you'll get an update. But also please feel free to make any comments. I try to interact with each one. This is very much a community. Or like or share the video. If you're a returning visitor, thank you so much for joining me once more. And just to say, you can get your free written daily horoscope fired to your device each morning by seeing the subscription link beneath this video. Now, as we come into this month, we're preparing for the North Node on the 17th to reverse back into the sign of Aries, which is the first sign of the zodiac, of course. Now, this hasn't happened for 17 years. At the end of its inversion in the sign of Aries, in 18 months' time, I think that's when we get back to the real true reset moment. That's when things will truly shift in an incredibly momentous way. But as that North Node does move, the true North Node, on the 17th, it is in a T-square with the potent energies of the planet of transformation, but also power of Pluto, located once more in the traditional sign of Capricorn. If we think what we've gone through since 2008, there's been a lot of focus on trying to create growth in as productive a way as possible, but that has seen big organizations, big corporations become ever more powerful. And as we come into this new month, because the Sun and Mercury are in such a tight connection, a cazimi, but also forging a beautiful link with Jupiter, there is a part of us that wants to feel that the best of personkind can be manifested to us this month. But unfortunately, despite that potentially wondrous start, because Jupiter, remember, can kid us into thinking things are better than they truly are, Mercury can be a bit subjective in the sign of Cancer, despite being in the cazimi. The reality is that although we may go for the escapism of Venus and Mars, because they're in an abrasive right angle with Uranus at the start of this month, any sort of sudden moves we make to have fun, to forget about our responsibilities and obligations, I think ultimately what we're being asked to do is become more and more conscious of the huge shift that's going on for us all. And part of that tension is going to reach a high point in week 3 of this month, when the Sun goes opposite Pluto on the back of the new moon in Cancer, but also we have Mars, when it moves into Virgo, goes into opposition with Saturn. Saturn in Pisces is asking us to become ever more mindful of our emotional, psychological and spiritual needs, but Saturn can of course be quite limiting and restricting, but also punish us in a way if we don't work hard enough at things. So when Saturn and Mars go opposite, at the same time that the Sun and Pluto are opposite, and the North Node inverses back into Aries for the first time in 17 years, now you can see why I'm saying it's such an incredibly powerful month. So that gives you the overview of where we are. I'm now going to go through the detail, but if you personally would like to benefit from the power of natal astrology and how it can help us all to guide our pathway through this existence, Please give me 3 pieces of personal birth data of time, date and place of birth, and I'll produce for you your 12-month forecast, totally unique to you, but also your life roadmap character analysis, which helps you to understand the patterns that have gone on in your life. It's 30% off with my special package. If you don't know your time, my new solar package, which doesn't include an ascendant, is proving very popular. So many people don't know their time. I've never been keen to sell noon charts because it creates a false narrative with an assumed ascendant, but this approach doesn't use an ascendant. So if you don't know your time, you can benefit from the same package. Please see the link below. Again, 30% off. So on the screen now, you can see the birth chart wheel for the first day of July. And obviously we need to zone in on the sun. So later on the 1st, the position of Mercury merges with the sun. So in traditional astrology, that's a cazimi, which amplifies the energy of Mercury, talk and thought through Gemini, but through Virgo, analysis and precision that creates a productive outcome. But in the watery sign of Cancer, we need to listen to our 6 senses and let our souls influence our thinking. But they're both propped up in a way by the sextile to Jupiter, which, as I mentioned, can give us a sense that things can improve, that there can be some kind of movement, especially around finances, that can please us. But we're going to have to show some self-restraint because Uranus is in an impulsive location and angle to both Uranus and Mars, which really sees us disliking restriction and also wanting to have some escapism, some fun. Venus and Mars in Leo can be very hedonistic. Also on the screen you can see the moon is in the freedom-loving Sagittarius, really disliking any restraints, but it's in a right angle with Saturn in Pisces. So even if Venus and Mars and the moon are all pushing us to follow our muse, be more passionate in our approach, Saturn is kind of restricting the moon, and Uranus is showing an erraticness in its angle to Venus and Mars. So consequences if we try to break out when we're not quite ready to do so. But the interesting thing is, is that on the 3rd we have a full moon, with the moon in its most tender location of its cycle in Capricorn. And what is challenging about this is the first of the key contrasts of this month. In astrology, if you have one side of the chart has key influences and you also have key influences on the other side of the chart, you get a seesaw chart. So basically you get an oscillation between the two competing energies. So the sun in Cancer is asking us to be mindful of our home life, our emotional world, our sense of peace and tranquility, security, family interactions, and it can be quite defensive. The moon in Capricorn can see our emotions closer to the surface at a time when we're wanting more nurture. So I think it's possible that there could be demands over the next couple of weeks around our work or around our professional or worldly interactions, or just the world energy, whatever is going on in the world can impact on that sense of serenity that we're looking for. It's just that Jupiter applies in a brilliant trine to the moon. So Jupiter can provide some levitation, but essentially we're still needing to balance that old concept of work and life. So work through the moon, life through the sun. So we've got a contrast there that's not easy, but Jupiter's asking us to show some faith, even though Uranus in the same sector is feeling very rebellious in its angle to Venus and Mars. Now on the 10th, Mars moves into the sign of Virgo. Now I like Mars in Virgo because it can be good for our physical vitality, because it's asking us to concentrate on what's essential. Mars in Leo for the previous 6 weeks is very much about the need to express our individual egos. It can be much more self-sacrificing in the sign of Virgo. So this is a good time to try and get a bit more grounded. But it's replaced by Mercury in Leo on the 11th, but not before Mercury goes into a big standoff with Pluto. So again, that emotional dimension, Mercury, clashing with the worldly dimension of Pluto. And remember, Pluto can be about power, but sometimes about hidden power. So we could be in a situation at the start of this month through this full moon that we're wanting to seek a sense of comfort, security, stability, but worldly demands could be in some way impacting upon us, whether we're doing something personally to create that tension or not. So in other words, the collective energy that's affecting everyone. I think the possibility that can occur this month is a big correction around the housing market. I think that's possible. Or where a lot of people have been working from home over the last few years because of COVID, there could be a big push to go back to working in a more conventional environment. So we've got the big business, the big money side of Capricorn and the power of Pluto competing with our need for our own individual and familial security. Something has to give because they're diametrically opposite. So that creates a dichotomy. However, Mercury moving into Leo is very playful, flirty, self-confident, can assert itself well. However, from the 12th to the 20th, we do have the Sun forging a very enlightening link with Uranus. So that's encouraging us to do things differently, to be open about flexing. But of course, Uranus in Taurus doesn't really like change. It's in full. And in some ways, the big reset that's going on is because we were all consuming whatever we were consuming without thinking too much about the impact that that would have. Cheap money, cheap interest, low interest rates, and obviously perhaps consuming things without so much consciousness about the impact on the planet itself. But I feel the Sun and its sextile with Uranus can give us some ideas to be more enterprising, especially on the 14th when it becomes exact. It's just that from the 15th to the 26th, Mars, however much it's pushing us to get fitter, be more conscientious, more sacrificing in Virgo, then goes into a very strident opposition with Saturn, the planet of limitation, through to the 26th. If you know anyone or you have any kind of Saturnian influences on Mars, you'll know that one of the things that Saturn on Mars can do is limit vitality. So you have Saturn in the psychological, emotional and spiritual dimension in retrograde in Pisces, in an opposition with Mars in the part of its journey where it's most sacrificing, most prepared to make way in terms of ego, but of course it's very much about the physical domain when it comes to our health. So I feel that our energy could take quite a big hit, particularly for those people who are not very integrated about their emotional dimension, who do want to live in a more 2D existence. So we're all being pushed to rebalance there as well. And again, it's another opposition. So it's a dichotomy once more, not easy. And then from the 17th to the 23rd, the Sun starts to apply within 3 degrees to an opposition to Pluto. Now this is one of the most important aspects that happens each year, because if you think about it, there's no bigger being than the Sun. It's the root of all our existences. But Pluto can be sinister. It can be about where power's being applied in a not obvious way. So the big change with Pluto in a retrograde in the 10th house, which is to do with structures, it's to do with more traditional practices. I feel that this is where there could be this big shift around property, because whether it's buying property or renting property, it's not just an issue that's limited to one country. It seems to be a problem that goes across the whole world. So I think there is going to be some kind of need to find some equilibrium within these contra pressures. and it isn't going to be easy. So I think we could all feel quite stressed out. And then on the 17th, as the North Node inverses to Aries, despite what's getting flagged up that this will be a time of new beginnings, I don't believe that's entirely true. The new beginning will happen in 18 months' time when the North Node gets back to 0 degrees Aries, because in terms of draconic astrology, that is the seminal part of the beginning of our soul journey. So we've still got more to understand about the reset that's going on, and because it squares to Pluto, that 10th house traditional energy, even if we start to try to do things in a new, fresh way, there's going to be resistance. It's not going to quite happen, despite some people saying it will happen immediately. Now, the new moon also occurs on the 17th. It's pretty close to being caught up in that opposition with Pluto. So once more, we've got contra energies that we need to somehow try to balance. Now, we get some opportunities to have fun and pleasure when the Sun moves into its home zone of Leo on the 23rd, but actually the Sun forges a beautiful link to Neptune itself retrograde, also in week 3. And I think what this is asking us all to do is to submit to the changes that are going on and not try to hold on to how it used to be. We've had a huge period of time where consumption has been the primary focus of many of us. I think now we're being re-educated that we need to be more humble, more grateful for any adventure that we have that involves international travel and the impact that that would have on the environment, but also in terms of, you know, just consumer goods, the things that we buy that keep the People's Republic of China working well, because it's cheap stuff and obviously it's feeding the material machine, but it's not stuff that generally we always need. So I think we're being asked to make life simpler and strip it down to what's really essential. So Neptune, very spiritual in its retrograde, is asking us to find a new spiritual reality. But that doesn't mean to say we can't have fun and pleasure. And on the 23rd, the Sun moving into Leo coincides, ironically, with Venus in Leo for the 4 months this year, starting its 44-day retrograde. So what will that mean? Well, we can see at the start of this month the clash between Venus and Uranus probably is going to push some of us to re-envision our love lives or try to create some new approaches around our social interaction. But Venus is about money, it's not just about relating. So Venus in Leo likes the good things in life. So I think the retrograde is saying, look, again, good things are nice. Let's have good things, but less of them. Let's enjoy our relationships, not based on the superficial, how things look, more about how things feel. Venus in Leo can be very generous and very kindly. So that could be something that comes from the retrograde, that we become more conscious of the value of warmth and affection. And it doesn't just have to be manifested in kind of big gestures or a show-busy razzmatazz, which can in itself be somewhat superficial. Now on the 28th, Mercury makes its way into the 3rd sign of its quick moving month, but into its home sign, or the 2nd of its home signs of Virgo. So this obviously is very much about being real, about being rooted, about trying to make sense of what's really essential. It's joining up with Mars, of course, Mars which has been absolutely battered pretty well up to the point Mercury moves into Virgo by Saturn. So if we have been feeling really short of vitality, a bit run down, feeling overwhelmed, finding it difficult to meet all the demands upon us, Mercury comes along and helps us to think in a crisper, more precise way of how we can make sense and simplify our existence as the month draws to a close. So what a month, folks. It's quite incredible. You know, there are huge opportunities with that cazimi between Mercury and the Sun at the start of the month, and Jupiter, the Jupiter blessed full moon. But I think we are going to find ourselves being pulled in very different directions this month, and it just depends if our focus is more on the emotional domain, I feel, and therefore the watery energies of Cancer and Pisces, we're going to do better. If we're too focused on the material plane, the earthy plane, then it's going to get more challenging. So we really need to understand the blessings that we have and really count them and realize that there is a change going on that's making us all very much more conscious, that we can't just freely roam around this planet doing exactly what we want when we want without there being implications. So with freedom comes responsibility. Please see beneath this video for your in-depth zodiac forecast from Aries through to Pisces. Thank you so much for joining me. It's been a real pleasure being with you, and please like, comment or subscribe.